everyone. My name is Mark Callahan, and I work on the product marketing team here at Strata Identity. I'm joined by Eve Naylor, who has joined us as a new program ambassador for Agentic Identity. Hey, Eve.
Hi, Mark. I'm very excited about working with y'all.
This is going to be fun. And I love the fact that you use y'all, you living in Dallas outside of Engraved. But yes, everyone always asks if if I'm from the South, and I've never lived there, but I use y'all all the time. So
I've
I
started to
feel like
use it non-ironically now, so
okay,
I
okay,
kind
good,
of really
good.
live here.
Well, so our audience that's joining us are individuals who have signed up for the private preview invitation that we extended as Strata is really digging into what it means to add those guardrails and observability for agentic workflows and agent users that we haven't had to deal with before. And it's like every week things are changing. It's the speed of change right now, I think, is kind of unprecedented, and how quickly everything is developing on a day-to-day basis. And so, Eve, you've done this for quite a while, and you've really had a lot of expertise in the space. What's exciting for you about agentic workflows or agent users?
The biggest thing is I've been working on the questions of delegation for a really long time, well before the current kind of Gen AI agentic moment. And I'm really excited about the possibility of digging into getting rid of impersonation, benevolent impersonation, where you share your credentials and it used to be somebody else, another human would use them kind of with your okay.
Kind of
With,
customer service, maybe, or something where somebody's
I
doing
mean,
something on
just
your behalf.
between, family members. I mean,
Totally, totally.
between two humans, Alex and Bob, what we were finding was you had to share your password to get things done in practical terms. And that's just, it's an anti pattern. It's not a good idea. We need to solve delegation for real, delegation of access. And then the toughest part is delegation of authority to act on my behalf. So now that we've come into this moment, there's my dog. Now
Yeah,
that we've come into this moment, maybe I'll be delegating something to her in future. Um, we are asking the questions of delegating not just access rights, but delegating authority obligations to another entity. And in this case, it's a software-based entity. And there's major questions about how to do that right. But the one thing we know that's wrong is just giving it our password and letting it act as us in a whole bunch of systems. Like now you don't
absolutely.
have fine-grained control over access. Now you have problems with auditability. So I'm quite excited that we're finally having this conversation now,
This
everybody.
is cool. Well, I mean, obviously, we can't hold back the onslaught or the wave that we're in right now of agentic adoption. As I look forward, of course, there's all these sort of mundane tasks that can be automated and make things go much, much faster. Just out of curiosity, is there any one thing about agentic capabilities that you're like, this is going to be cool and my life's going to be that much easier because of it personally? I kind of put you on the spot there.
Being, as I call it, a privacy fundamentalist, one of the things I'm most excited about is potentially a personal agent that helps me manage my digital data footprint online. And, there's lots of ways in which systems that monetize our data and get access to our data are all automated. So why can't we automate in response? So it's kind of a personal goal to get my arms around that whole matter. And I can't really, but maybe with an agent's help, I can.
I like that. And you and I have talked about that in the past. I had a history working at Twitter on the enterprise data team. And there's that element of what is our digital footprint and thinking about, yeah, exactly, especially in the light of social data and what things have we removed, but maybe still live on somewhere that we, as you say, sort of like this cleanup. It's like a Roomba for your, your digital privacy.
Oh my gosh, my little robot that does consent intelligence for me,
I
sign
love
me up.
this. So
Hoovering up my data, doing something with it, stopping its propagation. Yeah.
all those things, because I don't even know where to begin with that, but yes, now we have a name for it. So Roomba shall be our product as we go that direction. Well, I started to digress a little bit here. So you've spoken a lot and you've written a lot about delegated authentication. We talked about like the why you would do this in certain cases in the human world.
Uh-huh.
I suppose there's like the impersonation, and I suggested like a customer service agent who perhaps really antiquated, but is like taking over your account to show you through
Yeah.
how to use your benefits program or something like that. You talked about family members, but what
Mhm.
happens when we do handoff from Mark to Mark 2.0?
Mhm.
What maps and what doesn't?
Yes, a digital agent acting on your behalf. And it's funny that customer service agents, I mean, it uses the word agent for a reason. They're there to work for you essentially in figuring out a challenge or, using the system in a way that is how you would use it, illustrating how you do it right and fixing something on your behalf. So when it comes to, Mark 2.0, Eve 2.0, they're kind of pulsating, waiting to be given some instructions. There's some great opportunities around giving it its mission, characterizing the task that it needs to do, but in a more high level fashion. And, there's various level based frameworks, kind of ladders of how you define levels of autonomy. We see that with like self driving vehicles.
Okay.
And, what level of
Like
autonomy
my
is
car
it
can parallel
using?
park itself, or it can actually do
Yeah.
city driving.
It can
Yeah.
take over on the road and, autonomous trucks. And so we're starting to see these 5 level ladders of, how autonomous is some kind of agent, starting with a simple chatbot that's just, it's empowered only to do a simple thing,
Yes.
all the way to an agent that needs to go out to kind of fan out to a number of different systems and services and applications
And other
to
agents.
achieve. Yeah. So when you have to do that, like now you're not talking about the classic default deny authorization scenario where every step that gets made has to be lesser and lesser privilege to make sure that you got your arms around all of it. That's like, I don't know, I think about the innovation of macaroons, which are the fancy cookies that are able to embed entitlements and make sure that it's constantly getting sort of more and more constrained. Well, now you're talking about fanning out and touching all kinds of systems, and how do we actually manage that? So that's one of the things that we face as a challenge, an exciting new challenge, but a challenge nonetheless if you have a security mindset.
Absolutely. And the agents that we're talking about here could be ones that are homegrown that live within your organization's environment. It could be ones you created yourself, but we're also looking at what about the agents that come in from the outside that, on these
Mhm.
public agent platforms. We did some survey data that we actually asked participants, yeah, our audience here to complete when they filled out their submission to join the program. And we're going to do a follow-up session where we actually share back the aggregate results of that. So that'll be exciting. But nevertheless, those agents live in many different places too. So I mean, the challenge is compounded by architecture.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a faint echo of, the current enterprise situations that people have where you might have tens or dozens or hundreds. In a couple of cases, I've seen thousands of internally developed apps to run the business or that can be customer facing. And then you've got the wide world of SaaS apps. And, that's a pretty wide spread of quality assurance and controls over who gets access and all kinds of factors like that. So now we're replicating those challenges in the agentic world by having so many choices and by their being made so easy to build.
So, as we think about let's maybe touch a little bit more on the delegated authentication aspect. So, when it's two humans, if you're using it with a family member, you heaven forbid, anti-pattern shared credentials. I'm giving it to my brother. My brother knows to only do XYZ amount with it, but then he's not going to go do something untoward or inappropriate with it. Hopefully, I get along well with my brother.
I don't know your brother.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You don't know my brother that well, so maybe he does. But nevertheless, in the human world, there's that element of, the intent and how long and the duration of what we would allow somebody to have that access. But Mark 2.0, like, where can things go wrong? I guess I know. Are there places that you can think of, like where, oops,
Yeah.
that I shouldn't have shared those credentials with Mark 2.0?
Well, there's certain cases, like even in the today's circumstance, where we're not too good often yet at doing things like I think of them as expiring entitlements, simply putting time limits on how long the access lasts in order to accomplish the effect that you want to have. So we're not good at that in the non-agentic world, particularly. We need to get better at that and get more fine grained in respect to time and space and everything else. In the agentic world, we're going to need that. And we're also going to need really superior auditing of what's happening and who's taking access, who's using the access. and what is it that they did. So something that's new in the picture is how do we look at some access that was used and then judge whether it was on mission, that it was according to the charter that I set the agent to do. Those are some subtle semantic things that, when you think about authorization in the before time, we had enough trouble with the semantics of each application. And, so MCP servers are kind of specializing in packaging up the semantics of each application in the fashion of exposing an API, right? But now how do we control which elements of those get used? It kind of gets fractal very fast because everything you might be able to do with any one application, I mean, it's kind of infinite at the end of the day. It gives a lot of
It
choice.
truly is. Well, and couldn't Mark 2.0 do things in, whether not maliciously, but accidentally, well intentioned, repeat the task multiple times, and to a point of
Sure.
draining my bank account almost immediately. It's like, hey, go buy the concert tickets and book a flight to, go see Kendrick Lamar. And it did it once, but then it found VIP tickets and it got me first class tickets. And then it did it again. And then it bought it for another. I mean, yes, the impact gets
Yeah.
pretty profound.
And now this ticket buying that you're referring to, I think that's an example that we'll be seeing more of, right?
This is true, and actually, I think in an earlier video, Eric Olden actually shared the analogy there of how this passes through. Just as an example of that agentic workflow, and that example, just to remind everyone who, if you saw that video or not, was using an agent to go out and work on your behalf to go buy tickets to a very popular concert. And in doing so, it not only has to have access to the APIs at the ticket broker's site, so it has the right seats, the right venue location, the right date, but there also might be like an age element, age API for consent, for certain things. But then we also go further because, just as we're discussing now, what if I didn't want it to buy the $2,000 tickets. I put a cap of $200 ticket, or the ticket broker itself wants to have someone to make sure that there's actually a real live blood Mark Callahan behind this, Mark 2.0.
1.0, so to speak.
That's right. Mark 1.0, that exists, that is, one, good for it, that it's the right Mark, that it's not Mark, nefarious Mark, that it's Mark Callahan, the actual
Evil
one and
Mark.
only, and the consent thing, right? An angle where it says it's supposed to do this action. And I say, yep, that's correct. So that human in the loop element really does become, I don't know if I call it a problem, maybe I guess a challenge. Like, how do you reintroduce that in the agentic workflows, bind it back to a human's intent?
I think that's so critical to think about the aspects of uh, some of us who are privacy fundamentalists also worry about things like automation that gets run away. And so you always want to plan for, the unhappy paths or just the regularized paths of a check on runaway automation. And human in the loop has become, the way that we think about this, and designing the journey of how a human gets involved is just as important as all those, you know, back end. Mark 2.0 is still kind of a machine, and all that back end activity could be proliferating without your realizing it, unless you have those kind of breaks in there, those policies that allow for the triggering of somebody to come in and not not just approval workflows. We see those things a lot in
Hmm.
IGA, but seeing it as the natural consequence of getting into an area that's got squishier boundaries, and it gets into think of it as like an uncomfortable area for the agent. And that's a great chance to come and go, well, I would rather weigh in on this. I have opinions about this color, whatever it is. Okay, not about color of tickets, but color of a sweater that
I
you're
was going to say that, or the seat selection, maybe. Yeah.
Seat
Yeah.
seat selection
Yes.
is a big one.
Uh,
I have big opinions about that. Yes, absolutely.
are you a floor person, or are you a balcony at this point, based on your music background?
I'm okay with balcony for a
Okay.
live performance. When it
Okay.
comes to movies, we're always way up close.
Well, seat selection does obviously matter in this too. And then, there's an element too of, as we think back to the real world tie-in and binding that agent behavior back to the humans, there's also the regulatory licensure things that we need to consider, where we start talking about stockbrokers or medical
Mhm.
doctors or somebody who holds an actual human real world license that is asking the agent to go do the majority of a task, but at some point it has to come back based
Yes.
on the FDA license or their broker's license to ensure that can you actually write this prescription or can you execute this trade needs to be tied back to that human element as well. You can't just hand that off to the agent.
It should not be handed off. It can't be handed off. And I actually wrote a post recently about why AI can't be your actual therapist. A lot of people are just using AI as a
Where
therapist
can
because,
our audience find that, by the way?
oh, workshop.venfactory.com. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
When I
Okay.
look back at like the blogging that I've been doing lately, it turns out that I've had like a solid 2 months of AI blogging, but there's basically a law at this point that all you can talk about anymore is AI. So yeah, and talking about that, there's no legal liability, there's no confidentiality guarantee when you've got this software-based component in this role, seemingly in this role. So therapist 2.0 versus therapist 1.0, things definitely need to be handed off at a certain point. And that is almost like a classic approval workflow.
Yes.
If something can be achieved by the software to help the situation, at some point it does have to sort of deterministically go through a human for proper, whether it's legality or appropriateness or even separation of duties, violation checking.
Reputation. I'm thinking about
And
like celebrities who always, maybe have a little too much to drink and post something untoward on social media, and then oh, I was that could actually happen, right? Like if you accidentally send your agent off,
right.
bad things could happen.
Yes, sometimes humans need human approval loops
I
too, for
agree
sure.
with that. I agree with that. Maybe we need to like introduce that back into this as well. But
Stop me
yeah,
before I tweet again or something.
this exactly. The you know is the challenges are immense. They really are. But I think that a lot of what we're hearing from our customers and from the private preview audience as well is right now we're really in the experimentation phase, right? I think that everyone's just these problems aren't fully defined yet. We don't quite know which angle to take. You and I talked a little bit about like orchestration. We talked about our core angle being one of independence and neutrality. So I guess like vendor neutrality, perhaps
Mhm,
we look at this from the element of how do I extend my existing vendor infrastructure to adopt agent
mhm,
workflows? How do I
mhm.
MCP seems to be the one that everyone's adopting, but there's all these other protocols that are coming. I don't want to like hard code in having a universal remote or Rosetta Stone in the middle sounds like it's a lot more important now than before.
Yeah, honestly, there's so many options coming out and so quickly, new versions of models and many models that are tuned in various ways. Experimentation is appropriate at this point, I think, with some guardrails and being able to kind of hook them together um, at this juncture is so important, and accounting for humans in the loop, accounting for all the other infrastructure that they're going to need access to. So, like, how do you make sure that an agent has the data it needs? That entire process of feeding it what it needs to know in order to do what it needs to do, like
Yes.
all of that wants to be loosely coupled, I think. And once it is loosely coupled, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of um, consolidation into a single amorphous blob. So it's important to have a great way to orchestrate the pieces so that it's flexible for all the needs in the future and all the things that are going to be increasingly frequently made in the future.
You know, I had shared you and I were talking prior to the call. I actually looked at a article that Gartner had put out a note just recently about
Oh, yes.
handling delegated authentication from humans to agent AI agents. And as I was looking through that, they a couple of notes that they made as assumptions. And I didn't talk to the Gartner team here, so I'm not trying to give a direct quote. But nevertheless, they said that by 2028, so just 5 years, I'm sorry, 3 years out, they're assuming that 90% of agent workflows may potentially have to be undone because of the wrong way they've handled delegated
Cool.
authentication. It's just the easiest path and it's logical to share credentials right now, but
Ugh.
oops.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a rule. This rule is only honored in the breach, and it's you're supposed to throw the prototype away. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to end up going into production that, you can see the chewing gum and the baling wire. And so you want to be sure that the hooking together is flexible and has best
Yes.
practices kind of built in.
I
So,
like that.
yeah.
The flexible, I really that's a good analogy. The baling wire, if gardeners or anyone else that you can like reuse and it doesn't break after you use it, or the one-time zip ties are not the answer here.
Yeah.
This is
And
something
I
that's
hear you just
flexible.
had an encounter with barbed wire, and that's
I did at a farm in South
stressful.
Dakota, and that's it's top of mind.
Sorry to call it up.
It's totally top of mind. But I think the other thing that was interesting in the note was they mentioned, how much there's going to increase the first party fraud and the account takeover risk that is also subsequently coming because people still think that perhaps sharing credentials with Mark 2.0 is
Mhm.
the course of action here. And at Strata, we're saying firmly that's not the path. You are screaming that's not the path.
And you don't have to, is the thing. I mean, now that delegation options are becoming available, it's got to be considered a best practice not to be broken, right? Like, I've been predicting this day for a long time. We've been sharing passwords, and then we got passkeys, which were going to really make it complicated. To like, how do you have benevolent sharing of access? And, with user managed access, which, I've worked on for a long, 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 long time, um, the paradigm is Alice to Bob sharing of access. And so we didn't know about Alice to bot sharing coming along in the current era, and or Alice to Alice 2.0 sharing, right? So like it's important to be able to do that sharing in a constrainable, selective, auditable fashion. And so frankly, that's why we need more identities in the picture, identities for all the different entities that are involved, from something that's acting as a client app, which agents are going to be doing a lot of the time, as
Hmm.
seen from our kind of classic OAuth perspective, all the way to you're sharing with a company that needs access, and they've got agents that are working on their behalf to do something with what you shared. So there's going to be bigger and bigger ecosystems of these entities that need to play together, and it's going to have to be extraordinarily transparent for us to be able to check whether they're doing the right thing.
And I think that's probably a hope of the private preview program. I know that organizations who have signed up to work with us, ideally we would love to have people join on as design partners. Like as we can hear really more about the needs, we would love to help shape that back. And we're not just asking to give. We want to give back. We're going to, of course, you and I will do a follow up recording just on the aggregate data that everyone shared in filling out the form. Um,
That's really exciting, by the way, because you really reached statistical significance, I think, with
We
that
do,
survey.
we do.
So
I
I
mean,
can't wait
we're
to see some of that
the
data. Yeah.
audience. Just so you know, you're in a sphere of about 350 and growing organizations that have raised the hand, or individuals, I should say, to be clear, who have raised their hand and said, "Yeah, I'm actually interested in learning more." So you're right. It's the statistical relevance of our audience size, our N, is large enough to give some good insight. So I think that'll be exciting to share some of that data back with this group. But back to the experimentation, I feel like we're at a place where hopefully that transparency, we're not just talking about transparency of the workflows, but like we're all learning from each other because the problems aren't defined yet. Like we can't just hold all this stuff secret to our chest and think that we have all the answers. This is going to be a group thing decision. Like we're gonna do this together.
Yes, as in so many things, this is going to be a team sport for sure.
I like that. I like the agentic identity is a team sport. You're hearing it first. That's definitely it. Well, so you've written a lot about this. You mentioned that you've got your own blog. Again, where would they find that information?
Workshop.venfactory.com, and I hope to see folks there. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, please sign up for that. You will, we'll be contributing some, we have a Slack group where we'd like folks to join and actually have some questions. And so you and I will be participating actively in that as well, so that
Hmm.
if they wanted to reach out. And then videos like this, the next in the series, we'll go through some of the results that we heard from the audience in this, a couple little spoilers. I think that on-prem agent deployments seem to be just makes sense. It far and away as people are saying, this is where I need help. That's where we're experimenting. That's where we're safe. I think really, within that perimeter, like our known space.
Yes, I
And
think
so
people are looking for whatever control knob they can sort of crank all the way up to the right, and that seems to be one for starters. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how
that's
how
it.
this goes for everybody.
Well, we're thrilled to have you working alongside us. It'll be fun to do this going together going forward. Our audience has a chance to connect with you directly as well. And with that, thanks for joining. Glad to introduce you to our team, the team
I'm very
sport here,
excited as well.
and look forward to catching up again as we get into some more of the data and what we've heard about what people are challenged by when it comes to agentic identity. So stay tuned. Thanks, Steve.